call to order the December 6, 2022 Evanston Preservation Commission meeting. We have a quorum of 9 commissioners. Today, we do not have any old business, so we are going to go straight into new business. First item is the Preserve 2040 Long Range Work Plan. Cade, do you want to introduce this?
I can introduce this, and we've had many kind of conversations. I think this is the 4th or 5th time it's probably come back, and then it was in subcommittee for like 6 months. But we do recommend adoption of it, and I only received some minor comments from Commissioner Sullivan and then also from Commissioner Ziem. But the Preserve 2040 Long Range Work Plan acts as the Commission's principal policy document regarding the identification, documentation, and stewardship of Evanston's significant heritage resources, and as a guide for the oversight and administration of the community's historic preservation program, which is principally facilitated through the city's Planning and Zoning Division, with support from the Commission, as well as other partner organizations. Following adoption of this plan, it would supersede the previous 1981 preservation plan, which has seen its goals and objectives substantially realized.
So, do you have comments, Amanda?
Yeah, I just had a couple questions, because I wasn't here last time, so I just wanted to close the loop, but there was something about saving landscape in here that was, or trees and things like that. I just was unclear, is that something that this commission will make like binding with part of a COA approval process, or is that like a different part of the city that will regulate that?
I think there was two kind of options or two separate initiatives for that. I mean, that came up once before where we were asked or pleaded to deny a project because they were taking down multiple kind of heritage trees. And I think that we somewhat determined that it just isn't applicable. It's not in the ordinance to allow to give us that power. So one option would be to revise the ordinance to add that. But another one would just be that this body could advocate for a citywide tree preservation plan, which would probably be more appropriate, in my opinion.
Okay. And then I know one other thing that was interesting, or there are many interesting things, but one of the things that caught my eye was education for like homeowners and things like that. Some feedback I got from another resident that lives in a historic district, their comment to me was they thought the commission was inaccessible for people of modest means because they felt that they had to come up here with an architect and architect renderings to get anything approved, or it was like intimidating. And they said a lot of people in their neighborhood, which is a historic district, bypass that. They just do things without permits because the process is maybe expensive or daunting. So I didn't know if, I think it kind of alludes to it, but this plan, I'd love to have more education around an individual homeowner coming in front of this commission, to give them tools to feel like it's possible to get a COA without hiring an architect and paying architectural money if it's of course a relatively small change.
Yeah, I think there's multiple, that's true. I think that's something that is a common theme, and I think that there's also often the standards for review conflict sometimes with more vernacular landmarks that we have, and they're, it's kind of the percentage of the cost of what's appropriate compared to the overall value of the home is sometimes very difficult to justify. Someone has a $400,000 house with a clay tile roof, and how do you justify a quarter of the value of the house going back? And it's very difficult. So I think there's two aspects to that. There are many initiatives in here that talk about incentive frameworks and creating a pool of money that could be used specifically for some of these homeowners that have more vernacular homes, modest homes, because they are a really important part of our built heritage. These homes, even though they're not high style, they really symbolize and are part of this kind of collective memory of what used to be very common and prevalent in Evanston, and that's why they're landmarked. And then the other side is just, yes, offering more technical assistance, whether that be one-on-one technical assistance. You could create subcommittees that look at certain things for homeowners, and also just like written resources that would be available for them. But usually it's more of like a monetary issue, I think. So trying to address that because we don't have any financial incentives right now at all.
Yeah, I think that the issue this particular person brought up was more about the expense of hiring an architect, like feeling the need to have an architect because most of the people here are architects, so it's like architects, like the language, like the homeowner feeling that, like if they went before this commission, they would not be able to get it passed because they can't like speak the language of this panel, and it's overwhelming, it's intimidating. Like, I guess I was speaking for just having like some sort of like how-to or FAQ or something, like, so you don't have to hire an architect.
Yeah, there are guidelines that will come out that will address some of that. The other thing is that over the past year plus, more and more of the very small changes that are still required to come before us, Cade and Carlos have been handling administratively. And I think that whereas right now they're making the determination of what should come before this group and what should be handled administratively, I think it might be nice to codify that and say this kind of work, if you're making routine repairs, but changing material, for instance, going to hardy board siding, that's something that can certainly be done administratively, and Cade and Carlos always then would have the option to say, no, we think the whole council or all the commissioners should weigh in on this. But I think it might be useful, and I know it's not in the guidelines now, but maybe some clarification of when work can be reviewed administratively and there really is no need to come before this commission would be very helpful.
Just want to remind the commission that the rules and procedures have a table where we list what projects should go to the commission and what projects can go to the staff for administrative review. That's one thing. The other thing about requiring architectural drawings or done by architects in this case, one of the things that people are not aware, and maybe that's part of the education that we need to impart, that zoning is the first step for a project. So right at that point, if you have an addition where there's a structural work, you're going to need either an architect or engineer to provide those drawings. And also for the permit, because when you submit a permit, they go through the building code, which will require a certified engineer or architect. So it's not necessarily the commission that is, or the preservation ordinance that is triggering the review of the commission only done by architects. So I'm concerned that people will think that because preservation, they would not apply for a permit. I don't think that's accurate. I don't think that's necessarily reflective of what really should happen. But again, we can improve with education programs and show people how they can apply and submit information through this COA application. I think that the plan has that objective. And as Stuart mentioned, we're working on a guidelines also that for the user, not the commission. It's not necessarily something that the commission is going to administer. It's more something that the applicant, the architect, the contractor, or anybody that's interested can look at and kind of learn how to be successful when they apply for a COA. So I think that we don't always require architect drawings, but the city does for permits and zoning applications, whether or not you're a landmark or not, or a historic district property or not. So that's important to kind of separate. So that's basically it. I think that the program should address those concerns, but I think that is also something that is not necessarily accurate.
Yeah, I mean, that was anecdotal. I mean, that was, someone approached me because they knew that I was on the commission. But I think, Stuart, you made a good point. I think maybe more stuff over time has moved to administrative review, some of the minor things. So maybe that feedback was based on maybe a little bit, an experience maybe before that shift happened. I don't know, possibly.
But can I just say, I think that Carlos was, can you guys hear me?
Mhm.
My thing on? I think Carlos was getting at this, but I mean, there's a really long list of minor stuff that Kate and Carlos can review. So I remember putting the education elements into this plan. We talked about it. And I remember thinking that, like, we didn't want to say exactly what it was that we were going to educate people about, because this was meant to be kind of an open, flexible plan. But that's certainly one of the things that was on my mind, was to make sure that people understand that there's minor and major, and the only things that we're going to see are the major ones. And in that case, by definition, they need drawings and stuff. Does that, I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
I just said the same thing.
No, that's right. So just, it's a little unique, the program, in that the commission is empowered by the ordinance to essentially control everything. And we are empowered as staff only as much as the commission agrees. And that's delegated in what are called rules of circumstance, and that's that matrix of major or minor work. And that should probably be reviewed annually. I don't know when it was reviewed last. Not too long ago. I think it was maybe 2018 or something, where I think it was changed pretty substantially. And that's actually, I think that change is where more of the shift actually occurred than just us deciding kind of ad hoc that things would be done administratively. But it's certainly worth looking at again, revisiting, adding more specific projects. I think the intimidation factor is real. I think it's intimidating to come in front of any panel this large that's sitting up at the dais, and that's just an intimidating process. But I do think that we do a very good job as a commission of being more accessible and understanding and allowing back and forth debate and deliberation. Because a lot of them you close the record and that's that, and you sit down and please don't talk again, and we deliberate and take action. And it's not really, it is more of a back and forth here, and I think that kind of serves maybe the heritage of this commission when it was not binding design review and it was more focused on technical assistance and making persuasive arguments. And I think that tradition is kind of continued, which is a good thing.
May I just add something? I mean, occasionally we may run into a major application where someone may need assistance. And what I was thinking of is when they were talking about the Pilsen Landmark District, there were several architectural firms that were going to essentially partner with the community and offer some kind of assistance with, guiding them through the process, if it was a major project. And so I wonder if that was something we could possibly explore, if ever that is the case, where we have someone that may need help, like shepherding them through the process, if there's a local firm or something that would, offer some assistance that way.
Okay, one other thing, and I talked to Kate about this, and I know it sounds like it might not be incorporated in the plan, but I just wanted to mention the deconstruction part. So Initiative 3637 talks about reusing old materials instead of putting them in the landfill, which I totally support. My one concern around it was when materials are maybe not safe to reuse, like things that have lead-based paint, things like that. I'm not sure how or if, or that's later on maybe that we think about that. But I mean, I live in an old house, over 100 years old, and we're going through this abatement process with windows. It's really extensive. And I just want to make sure that people aren't reusing materials that aren't safe to reuse, especially with kids and things like that.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I don't have the answer. We can look up how other people deal with that, whether it's just that they have to disclose that when you're purchasing these donated materials, because certainly it is possible to encapsulate and do various remediation on these features. But I think that the actual deconstruction itself is more maybe where the issue is than someone picking it up at a salvage yard and repurposing it and repainting it. I don't know how they handle the removal of these features, if we're talking about like wholesale instead of demolition, it's deconstruction of a house. And we could research that, but certainly that would be part of, if the deconstruction ordinance were to, move forward, those would be the types of conversations that, we could have and figure out.
It's a really kind of nascent idea that I know we were, there's a kind of not-for-profit in New York that's really developing the kind of organizational skills and technology to do this at a somewhat large scale. And there's nothing like that in Chicago. I mean, it's something that's more, it's several years away. And clearly part of the technology that's being developed is how you can safely and efficiently use the materials. But it's more of an idea now. While I have the floor, I did think the plan was an amazing collection of, of ideas. And some of them more like, for the future or aspirational. I liked the matrix showing things that might be done soon. But it's still, it's very imposing. And one thought I had is that maybe the new officers of the commission each year should get together at the beginning of the year and pick out, select a few, maybe, 2 or 3, 4 specific items that it's realistic to work on. Because otherwise I'm afraid that all the great ideas will, get lost. But I was really impressed with the work product itself.
I think that's a really good point. We were kind of talking about that off the cuff earlier, but I think that if you look at this is like almost a 20-some-year work plan. So I think it does make a lot of sense that each year there would be like annual work plans that are created where you're picking and choosing things that you think are actually achievable. Or some of these things are, the political will isn't there yet, where it might be in the future. The circumstances, the environment that we live in doesn't necessitate some of these things immediately, where it might in the future. So, that matrix of when things might happen, that's really just kind of a best guess, I think, at this point. It's a nice guide. But I agree with you.
I had a really teeny comment going back to the deconstruction initiative 3.6. And because this is a 20-year some plan, I don't know if this I didn't notice it elsewhere, but when we end with consider partnerships with the Evanston Rebuilding Exchange, I think we should say like, or similar organizations, because, you don't know who in 10 years is going to be there. So we have to be careful about limiting, just the language around that and all of it. I also think that, like the guidelines that are coming out and different things that we can do as far as education and services we provide, I guess. I'm excited, or I'd like to see more people who don't live in historic districts or whatever, but live in a home that things can be applied to in Evanston. There's huge swaths of Evanston of people in homes that could gain knowledge from all the stuff that we produce and all the knowledge that we have. And I'm really excited about making that more accessible to homeowners in the city, at a very ground level, not talking about architects and everything else, but like what can you do or what should you be aware of when you're living in this wonderful resource in Evanston, even though you're not in a historic district, because, we technically only have purview over certain districts in Evanston, and there's so much more here that I'd like to see some of this applied to.
Are there any other comments about the long-range plan? Do you want us to make a motion to adopt? Is there a commissioner that would be willing to make a motion to adopt the plan? Go ahead, sir.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt the Preserve 2040 Long-Range Work Plan.
Second.
I think that's fine. Yeah. Second by Carl. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It is unanimous. Passes 10-0. Okay, Kay.
The next item, the only remaining actionable item, is approval of the 2023 meeting schedule. I think every date fell on the regular schedule, second Tuesday. I didn't see any conflicts. And then we are proposing another August recess, which seemed to work relatively well this last year.
If this is acceptable, is there a commissioner that would like to make a motion to adopt the 2023 meeting dates? Beth, go ahead.
I move to adopt the 2023 meeting schedule for the Evanston Preservation Commission.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Sarah seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous, 10-0. Okay, meeting minutes.
Approval of the minutes of November 8th. Carlos, did you receive any comments?
I have not.
I did not either.
I have one. It's in the body of the commentary on the project with the horizontal window and the canopy. There's a line in there that says, what do you call it, dormer? The eyebrow. It says eyebrow canopy. I'm not sure what we meant. It was just a flat canopy with tie rods, right? So, yeah. So I just want the word eyebrow eliminated.
Are there any other comments on the meeting minutes?
I just wasn't here, so I
You
abstained.
can, okay. John, do you want to make a motion to approve with your edit?
I move that we approve the meeting minutes of November 8th, 2022, with the exception of removing the word eyebrow in front of canopy.
Is there a second? Second by Stuart. All in favor?
Aye.
And any opposed and abstentions? Jamie and Amanda abstain. Okay, Kay, do you want to give an update on the Legacy Business Program, please?
Yes, a very quick update. We received, which maybe we updated you last time, but we received 12 responses to the RFP. We've now selected 3 out of those 12, and we'll be conducting interviews the second or third week of December to select someone to move forward. I think they all had very similar timetables for kind of launch of the program, being sometime in the early spring, whether it be April or May. And then these respondents, they are responding to both building and launching the web platform for this, as well as doing some of the content, the copy for it. And there's also a pretty extensive participatory process between them and the legacy businesses that we've identified and other stakeholders. And then also the design of the plaques and other identification features.
Kate, I have a question about that. When you say "we," can you remind us who is on the committee or whatever to select these people?
Yeah, sure. So the way that the city's kind of its purchasing division works and the guidelines that we have is that we receive the initial responses, initial RFPs, and then city staff is the one that has to make the selection on narrowing that down, whether it be 3 or 4 or 5. So that was myself and 2 members of the Economic Development Division, and then a member of purchasing that made those decisions. And then the interview panel will be those same individuals, and then 2 members of the Preservation Commission, so, Chair Reinhold and Commissioner Klein, who are on that working group. We'll sit in on those.
Okay. Cade, update on the Downtown Heritage Resource Survey, please?
Yes, I'll provide an update on that. I think this will probably get to you by January. It's a little bit just backlog based on some other things that came up. I did want to give some general kind of statistics from it that I think are interesting. So I think everyone knows we employed 3 survey teams. Each one had 3 commissioners and 2 staff members. That was conducted in the late summer and fall. We surveyed a total of 40 supplemental resources, in addition to the 143 that were previously surveyed by the Preservation Commission in 2007. Of those 40 supplemental resources surveyed, 11, or just over 27%, were identified as landmark eligible. That brings the total of eligible resources in the downtown to 31 between the 2007 and 2002 surveys, and the downtown already has 29 registered landmarks. Of those 40 that we surveyed, 3 were identified as not contributing to the character of the downtown. That's about 7% of the total surveyed. The majority of the properties surveyed were identified as being in good condition. That number is 21. 9 were identified as being in excellent condition, 10 in fair condition, and 0 in poor condition. The majority of properties surveyed were identified as having good integrity, 18 in total. 10 were identified as having excellent integrity, 9 had fair integrity, and 3 had poor integrity. The next steps it'll just be continuing background research, so that's where it kind of gets backlogged, is researching all the former permits, finding construction dates for each one of these. Most of them have been moved from this kind of manual platform into a digital survey sheet. And then we'll also prepare a survey report, as well as identification of I think there's 3 traditional zoning districts in the downtown. We'll apply some character profiles to those and have some associated recommendations that the commission will review, and those are obviously non-binding recommendations. And I did just want to give an update that the information already, even though it's not finalized, it is being used. So one of the survey sheets and the information was part of a land use commission case that went at the last meeting in November. So the information is valuable and being used already.
Kate, I have a question. How is this data going to be accessible to the community, and how does that relate? Is it primarily accessible to just city and city staff, or is it going to be something that community, like if somebody wants to learn more about these buildings or understand more about these properties, is that going to be something that?
Yeah, so one of the very first, or it's in the top 5 at least, powers and duties for the commission is to prepare lists of eligible properties. So this kind of fulfills that need. It'll be posted on the Historic Preservation webpage. Individuals can use it for kind of general interest. Individuals can use it to nominate properties if they feel like they're deserving. And then certainly it'll be used by city staff more prevalently, just to kind of make sound planning decisions.
And does this data get passed back to the building owners, I assume?
It will be. A copy of the report will be sent, I think the entire report, not just the individual survey sheets, but we'll let them know.
Okay.
Mhm.
So they'll be able to take that information and.
Yeah, and I think we saw that during our survey. I think in every single group I had, owners came out and were very interested, very skeptical, I think, at first, but then very eager to kind of have those conversations about, what's significant about their property, what they know about it. A lot of them know a lot more about the history than we would just walking on the sidewalk. So I think there's genuine interest as well.
And you mentioned that this has already been used on a case with the land use. Is this something where if any of these buildings come up for potential demolition, this data then would be immediately accessible for those cases?
It can be used as justification for, for making referrals or something to this commission in that kind of instance. I don't know how it.
At least information for now.
Yeah, I think it's more valuable for making decisions for like major variations or alterations or plan development applications where they don't know the significance of some of these buildings because they're not registered as landmarks currently.
Excellent. Okay, Carlos, do you want to give an update on the Heritage Resource Design Manual, please?
Sure. Basically, last time I sent the latest version of the manual to Kate and Stuart, Julie, and Jamie. I got feedback from everyone. Jamie still has not been able to, but I think that's not necessarily a bad thing, because what I like to do is put together the comments I received from the other 3, send the latest version to all the members, and I think Jamie has a very good eye to kind of make it even better. So my hope is that if not in January, we're going to have a new version, not a new version, a revised version in February. And that is the document that I spoke earlier about. That is a guideline for the users, not the commission. So the language was purposely less complicated or, technical. And so the comments I received sort of a mix of those sort of had to sort it out, what looks too technical, what does not, because the purpose is make it easier for the applicants. So yeah, we're moving forward, and I tried to pick local examples, like photos of actual buildings in Evanston, although you have to be very delicate not to use bad examples in the publication, but the good examples. So it's a little bit challenging, especially for new construction, for instance. We don't have too many new structures. But then again, they not always follow the standards as in an ideal situation. So we had to give ourselves a little bit of a slack on, what would be a perfect project versus what the objective of the preservation ordinance is to meet the standards. Again, we're not reviewing quality or excellence in design, but we're looking at projects that should meet the standards in the best possible way. So I will continue working on that. I needed to take a little break because there was so much information I received from the comments. It was at a point where I was saturated with, okay, how do I organize all this information in a way that makes sense without necessarily changing the document too much. So that's where we are at this point.
Okay.
The only other item is I just want to remind commissioners that nomination for officers is still open. We have received some. You can just, basically, how it works is if you nominate somebody, I'll reach out to that individual. I won't say who nominated them, but I'll say you've been nominated. Then I ask if they would accept that nomination. And then if there are 2 members that are nominated for the same position, usually I disclose that information because very often one individual is amenable to somebody taking that role over them. So how it's worked, I think the last 2 times is we've just voted on a slate of electors. We've only had 1 for each position, and that's probably how it'll happen again. It doesn't have to happen that way, but those elections will happen at the January meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think you're all aware that it is Mark's last meeting after 6 years. So we would like to thank him for all of his time, and you were chair for 2 years, 3 years? 2?
6 years.
It all blends together, so. So we greatly appreciate all of your time and all of your hard work. Mark, you've done a lot of wonderful things while you've been on this commission.
Thanks. It's been a pleasure to serve with all the commissioners, past and present. And I think Carlos was the only one here who was here when I started, and I'm sure that Carlos saw a new commission. Great pleasure with the city staff.
Well, if I may, since you brought my name up, I remember before he was appointed, we have our educational training session, and he was definitely shy about, how can he be so effective? And I learned a lot from him in terms of the law, how the ordinance should be applied, and how the commission can fulfill its role without being afraid of making decisions, and they're sound decisions and just decisions and sympathetic decisions towards the applicant. And then he was brave enough to become the chair, which we are very much appreciative. That took on another level where we enjoy his sense of kindness again towards the applicant. And I want to thank you for your 6 years of service. It's been a pleasure for me to work with you. Okay, you want to say something?
I will always remember you, Mark, for the way that you very delicately handle extremely contentious situations in a way that I have an inability to sometimes. And my other favorite line from Mark, and it's a wonderful reminder for everybody every time, is just that this body's powers are limited by design, and as much as we would like to, we should react to what's proposed instead of try to redesign something for them. And we would like people to produce 3D models of their plans. But I very much, I was kind of thrown into working with you under very unique circumstances, and I've really appreciated it. I've learned a lot from you, and I'm sad to see you go. And if we ever amend the ordinance and you want to come back for a third or fourth term, I will give you a call.
Well, with that, Mark, would you like to adjourn your very last meeting? All in favor, or there's a second, I guess. Second is Aleka. All in favor? Aye. And then we have some desserts to celebrate Mark's last meeting. So if you guys want to stick.
The meeting has adjourned, so we're gonna just